BearSkills.
Welcome everybody to the channel and welcome to my guide for the Windguard class. So this guide should cover everything you guys are going to need to know about the Windguard class. Everything from an overview, a deeper look into the abilities, a look at the class power, how the rage mechanic works, and as well as some general tips and strategies strewn throughout the video as well as towards the end. If you guys have watched my Phantom guide, this video will be structured and laid out very similarly, so you guys should know what to expect. So moving into an overview of this class, the Windguard is going to be a more supportive class out of the three available. It has strong abilities, a very strong rage. It will excel particularly at Gates of Fire and Spoils of War. And it's going to have 100 health. So it's going to be very middle of the road in terms of health, not quite as high as the Marauder's 125, but not quite as low as the Phantom's 75. Keep in mind that while the abilities of the Windguard are strong, they are based more towards defense and support, so you will have a slightly weaker offense than, say, the Phantom or the Marauder. I also want to mention the passive of this class, which is Skeldine Resolve. This passive will make negative status effects such as Hunter's Mark or the negatively impaired movement speed of Frostbolts. The duration of those will last less time on a Windguard, so you'll have those negative status effects for less time than other classes will. And shockwaves produced by things such as Blast will have less effect on a Windguard. So that covers the overview, so let's jump into the abilities. So we have two to choose from. We have Smoke and we have Blast. So Smoke is a great defensive tool, makes allies untargetable, creates vision impairment for your enemies, as well as does damage over time to your enemies. Blast is more of an offensive ability. It is great for kill confirmation, although it is hard to use, particularly on the Windguard, as if you choose Blast over Smoke, you do take away one of your escape potentials. The untargetability that Smoke provides you is a great way to escape with the Windguard, so sacrificing that for Blast may or may not be worth it depending on your playstyle, so keep that in mind. So let's take a look at Smoke. So on screen right now you should see some examples of me using Smoke. Essentially what happens is your character pulls out a canister and smoke starts pouring out from it in a direct path behind them. The smoke will follow any direction that you go, up, down, left, right, any direction, and essentially for the duration, smoke will be released out. This means that you can go as far as you want, and smoke will still be deployed as long as the duration is active, meaning the farther you go, the more smoke will be on the map per ability. So something that is really good, and I'm showcasing that hopefully in the background right here. You guys should see that I am using my class power, which is Salvation Surge, which makes me move really rapidly towards a teammate. And if I activate Smoke while I have Salvation Surge going, I will go really far, especially if the teammate is across like the map from me. And that means that I'll be moving super far with Smoke active, meaning that I'll be able to cover huge portions of the map with Smoke. So keep that in mind. Combining Smoke with your class power is very strong. And Smoke in general is very nice. It causes damage over time. It does appear as a gray mist for you and your allies. It will be a green mist for your enemies, so keep that in mind. And, you know, like I said earlier, it's a very great escape tool for the Windguard because it makes you untargetable while you're in your own smoke. So if you have somebody chasing you, and say you've got even some fireballs on you, if you activate Smoke, you become untargetable, so most of the time those fireballs will miss, especially with a little movement mixed in there. And generally the enemy, because their vision is impaired, they're taking damage over time, they're going to have a hard time tracking you. So it's a very great escape tool, and it is an amazing ability. So looking at Blast, works identical to how it does on the Phantom. Essentially a projectile is launched out in a slight arc, and if you hit the ability button a second time, it will detonate early. If you let it continue and it collides with something, it will detonate. And when it detonates, a large area of effect is exploded, essentially, which causes knockback, as well as a pretty considerable amount of damage depending on how far the enemy is from the center of the explosion. The closer to the center, the more damage they are going to have dealt to them. And keep in mind that this blast is affected by the Skelding Resolve passive ability that the Windguard does have. So against another Windguard, Blast is not going to have as much of a knockback. So very simple. Works the same as the Phantom. Personally, I would recommend thinking long and hard before you take Blast over Smoke. As I said earlier, taking Blast will limit your escape potential that Smoke gives you. So, especially with the ability to combine Smoke with your Salvation Surge ability, I would probably recommend taking Smoke in most situations, though it is personal preference. One thing I will say that I have discovered about Blast, thanks to my lovely viewers letting me know, Blast will actually dissipate enemy Windguard smoke. So if you take Blast, regardless if you are playing Windguard or Phantom, if you take Blast and you activate that in a Windguard's smoke, the blast radius will dissipate all the smoke in the blast radius. So essentially, whatever smoke is in the blast radius of Blast will be dissipated. So it is actually a way to counter other Windguards using smoke. So keep that in mind. It can be very useful for that kind of thing. All right, now looking into the class power, which is Salvation Surge. So Salvation Surge provides great mobility. It heals teammates as well as yourself. Combos with smoke, as I mentioned earlier. And it will grant 50 shield to both you and your teammate. So it is a very, very good ability. We're showcasing it right now on screen. And you can target your teammates from really, really far away. You move at really high speeds. Keep in mind, if your teammates move too far out of your targeting radius, you will kind of miss the ability. Now, keep in mind that doesn't actually use the ability up. There is a very, very short cooldown if you do miss the Salvation Surge. So keep that in mind. But it's not near as much of a penalty as the duration normally is when you do activate Salvation Surge. It's a very strong ability. You can save your teammate's life with it, get around the map, particularly at Gates of Fire or Spoils of War. If you have gold and you're a long ways away from your base and you see a teammate is there, you can use Salvation Surge, move around, move across the map very, very quickly, be able to avoid a lot of enemies, and, in general, provides great mobility. Keep in mind it does have a long cooldown duration upon use, so make sure you're managing your cooldowns properly. Now, looking at the Rage mechanic. Oh, I also want to mention that the class power heals you for around 65 health. I couldn't get an exact number, but it's about 65 health that it does heal. So keep that in mind. And that is healing that it does to both you and your teammate. Okay, so moving into Rage. So Rage, essentially Salvation Surge, when it's raged, will grant an extra shield to your teammate, as well as the healing it normally does and the shields it normally gives you. And it will also grant your teammate a short duration Berserker buff. So this is the same buff that you get from defeating the Berserker Wraith in a match, although the duration is slightly shorter. Your teammate will glow nice and shiny blue with like lightning streaking around them to show off that they are buffed with the Berserk buff. So keep that in mind. It's a very simple rage ability. It works exactly the same as Salvation Surge does, the only difference being it grants extra shields and grants the teammate buffed with Salvation Surge the Berserk buff. Now, I do also want to mention that if you do miss the Salvation Surge when it's raged, so if your teammate flies out of your path or line of sight and you don't quite get the Salvation Surge off, it will not use up the rage, so don't worry about that. If you see an opportunity to give your teammate the Berserk buff that you think would be beneficial to your team, absolutely go for it. Alright, so moving into some general tips for the class. Number one, Blast counters smoke. So keep in mind, any smoke of an enemy Windguard that is caught within the blast radius of a blast ability will be dissipated. You can use your Salvation Surge power to escape from situations if you have a lot of enemies on you and there's a teammate far away. You can activate the ability on the teammate, and it will have you move at great speeds towards your teammate, which, will get you out of that situation. So it is a great way to escape. Just keep in mind it does have a long duration. Keep an eye on your teammates. As Windguard, you're more of a supportive class, and your class power is all about healing and shielding your teammates. This also heals and shields yourself, and this shield does stack with the shields you can find on the map, so a total of 100 shields is possible. Even more if you have your ability raged. So keep that in mind. You're going to want to constantly be using Salvation Surge on your teammates to help them out if they're low on health, or if they're in the middle of fighting, combat, you might want to give them some extra shields. And that benefits you, as well as benefits your teammate, so it's always great to be doing. Something that I do want to cover that's really important for some tips is to time your rage effectively. When you do get rage on your Salvation Surge, I would recommend kind of saving it. Uh, at that point, instead of trying to, just go for the nearest teammate, what you want to do is you want to look for a teammate that is in a great situation to actually attack enemies. So if you see a teammate heading towards some enemies and they're behind them a decent distance away, not next to any like wind tunnels or anything like that, it might be a good time to use your rage on your teammate. They're already in position to start doing damage. So if they get the Berserk buff, they're going to be doing tons of damage and might get multiple kills, which is great for the team. So that's a particular situation that might be good for using your rage. Essentially, you want to look for where you can get the most value out of your Salvation Surge once it is raged. Um, Out of the rage abilities, the Wind Guards is probably one of the most game-changing if used properly. I've had Wind Guards on my team and Wind Guards that I've gone against completely change the game by providing the Berserk buff at the right time to the right teammate. So keep that in mind. Very important to time your rage effectively and use it where it will be most effective. Generally, if you have a Phantom or a Marauder, they're great people to give the Berserker buff to. If you have a really good Wind Guard on the team, though, you can give it to them as well. Um, Something else that it's good for is if you do see a teammate that is running an objective, it may be okay to give them the Salvation Surge even though it is raged, just for the extra shield and health they will get normally, so that they can run the objective a little bit better. That is one of the times that using it and not actually getting the Berserk buff off would be okay. So keep that in mind. So that pretty much covers the Windguard for the most part. It's relatively simple in idea and theory, but it gets quite complicated with knowing when to exactly use Salvation Surge, when to give out your rage, all that kind of stuff. And I'm still learning as well. Um, but this guide should get you started, should tell you everything you guys are going to need to know so you guys can start improving immediately. Hopefully this video was helpful, and if it was, make sure to give it a like. If you're new to the channel, always consider subscribing as it does help the channel out a ton, and hopefully I'll see you guys in the next one.